Today we're going to be talking about how to make a lantern using simple household materials that you could find in your recycling bin or easily at the grocery store. The first lantern that we'll look at will use a brown paper bag along with some vegetable oil or any other household cooking oil, any kind of construction paper or computer paper, a pencil, materials or shapes that you can trace, and then markers, crayons, color pencils, glue, and of course a pair of scissors. So if you want to take a moment to gather those supplies, meet me right back here. So when I'm thinking about how I want to decorate my paper bag to make it a lantern, I like to think about the colors that I might want to use, and then any shapes to help create patterns that could go along the top or maybe down the sides to create, to help build my image. And then I've already pre-cut a couple of simple shapes that I know relate to the holiday that I prefer to celebrate or I was raised celebrating. And so I have those made ahead of time so that I can just I can glue and decorate with those as well while I build my picture and decoration for my bag. So that's something you could do too. You could, if you don't have all your materials at once, maybe you have construction paper and scissors, and you could sit down and create all sorts of shapes to help add to your design as you decorate your paper bag. Now, one thing I'm thinking of is things I might see on the holidays or decorations that people might use. I like Christmas lights a lot. I like that the lantern celebrates light. This is a time of the year when the sun goes down a lot earlier, our days are shorter, our nights are longer. And to have nice celebratory colored light can really change one's mood. And so I'm thinking of maybe I could create a series of Christmas light shapes going across the top of my paper bag. And so what I'm doing is just alternating color pencils and drawing just kind of that shape that Christmas lights are, not quite an oval, kind of a pear shape, and using lots of different materials. I'm using my colored pencils, I'm using my crayons, and I'm just making these simple shapes, not worrying about them being perfect, not worrying about them being spaced out too much. I could create an alternating pattern, and so what I could do is pay attention to the first decision I made, and then make that again. And then what I'll do is I'll make the same decision again. So then I'll add maybe red, orange, red, blue. And so I'll grab my red, but I could change the type of red that I want to use. Maybe I'll use a red color pencil instead. And then use my orange crayon for the second orange one. So just creating lots of different decisions I can make while I'm making my design to keep the process interesting for me, and then also to make the project more interesting for others. So now that I've got my series of lights, I can draw a fun sort of line going between all of them that we can use to connect them to make it look like a series of Christmas lights going across the top of my paper bag. So that's one way to start your design, and I like to choose going across the top. Then I'm thinking about images for the front of the bag. And so what I've mentioned is using crayons and creating textures a really fun way. So maybe I want to create a specific area of color right here. And I don't need to know exactly what to do. I can just put my texture down underneath and choose a color that I like that helps me celebrate the holidays. So I'll grab my green, and what I can do is use my green to capture a little bit of texture and make my paper bag a little bit more interesting to look at. And my texture's moving around, which doesn't bother me too much. It even starts to creep up to where my first decorations are. It starts creating kind of a background, foreground situation as well, which can add complexity and a variety to your image to make it more interesting as well. And then another thing that you can do is you can think about simple shapes to trace. I love using my hand as a design basis, especially when we're young artists, because we grow and change. And so our art also becomes a documentation of how big we were at a certain age, and can be a fun thing to share or observe when you bring out these decorations in the future. So I'm just going around, tracing my hand with my green marker. And my hand's a lot bigger, so it takes up a bunch of space. And then I didn't connect my wrist, so what I'll do is I'll just draw the bottom part of my hand there. And so now I've got my green hand, and I like that idea of the texture, and so I might actually continue doing texture with my crayon and my cardboard, or I could just carefully color with my crayon as well. Wax does a nice thing because it interacts with the oil at the very last step. And so crayons can be a really great activity to create a variety on the surface as well. Or a material, I should say. So I'm just going through, coloring my hand. And you can see it's actually started picking up the texture of the paper underneath as well, which I'm fine with. And then maybe I can use a little bit of my red for the background too. You know that red and green are complementary colors, so they go together really nicely. And so what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of red to help my green hand sort of pop out a little bit, but then blending it up into my green so I have a nice transition of green to red. And remember, you can use whatever colors and create whatever design that you want. I'm just trying to demonstrate how to use a variety of different colors on your paper bag lantern. And I'm having the fun realizing that my hand is now starting to look like a Christmas tree. And so I'm going to play off of that and use my black marker to draw what could look like a tree trunk coming off the bottom. So I'm using my lines to create the texture of a tree trunk and just outlining that shape. And since the bag is already brown itself, I don't have to worry about actually coloring the color of the tree trunk. If I color everything else around it, it helps emphasize that brown part on the tree part, on the tree trunk. And so I've used markers, I used color pencils, I've used crowns and textures, I've created a pattern somewhat across the top, I've traced a simple shape, I've drawn some detailed texture lines, and now I'm thinking about, okay, what can I do with my circle shapes that I've cut out of construction paper? And I think they might look nice as ornaments on my hand now that my hand is starting to look like a Christmas tree. So I'm going to take some time and actually organize and lay out how I want my circles to be used before I glue them down. And this is important. This is a part of the planning process for art that can help us make our decisions so that if we were to glue something down and not like how it looks, we're less likely to make that kind of mistake and get frustrated. And what's nice is the construction paper is a thicker paper. And so when the light shines from the inside out, it also creates the effect of silhouettes. And so I really like how that looks. I might remove a few. I feel like I have a lot of big red ones, and I don't need that many. The size of the large ones is kind of throwing me off. I like the idea of them being smaller up top and getting bigger closer to the bottom. And so I'm gonna move them around just a little bit, but keep the colors balanced out. That looks good. That looks good right there. So once you have your shapes arranged how you want, take a moment to glue them down. Remember, when we use our glue sticks, it's important that we just unroll our glue a little bit. We don't want to unroll it all the way, because then we could smash this down, and we don't want to be wasteful with our art resources. And I'm just going to carefully add a little bit of glue to the back of each circle and glue them down where I've arranged them. And then remembering to put the cap back on our glue stick when I'm finished. Now that I've glued down my shapes, I have one more step, which is adding the oil, but it's important to give our glue a chance to dry. So once you've glued your shapes down, give your glue about 10 minutes to set. So you can press pause right now and meet me back here in 10 minutes to add oil to our brown paper bag lanterns. Now that our glue has had time to set, we're going to talk about using some household cooking oil to add to the material. And so what I have is just a little bit of vegetable oil. You could use olive oil as well. And then I'll be using a paper towel to apply the oil to the paper bag instead of getting a brush dirty. And so what I do is I'm just dipping my paper towel in my oil, and you don't need too much. With the oil, it spreads around and soaks through. And then what I'm going to do, oh, I almost forgot. You need to put newsprint underneath. So I'm sorry, it's very important to take a moment to protect and cover your work area. And so you can pause if you forgot like I did and just set it aside. Find some newspaper for your work area and then put your project on top of the newsprint first. And then like I said before, use that oil and then just gently spread it across the entire surface of your paper bag. And if you notice, the oil doesn't smudge or make the marker bleed, and it doesn't smudge or move the crayon as well, or even my construction paper elements either. So everything just absorbs the oil and becomes a little bit more translucent. And translucent means that light can shine through the material much more easily. And so that's what's going to help people see the light shine from the interior of my paper bag. So I've added oil to my entire surface of my project. You will want to do the other side as well once you've decorated it. And then it's important to give your paper bag project maybe 2 days to dry. The oil can be dangerous, especially if you're using a real candle. And so giving it a chance to absorb and then some of the moisture to evaporate is important. I like to sandwich it into some newspaper so I won't get anything else dirty. And then I will set this aside for a day or two, let it dry, and then when I remove it, I can open it up and add a candle to the inside and see how my pattern shines. I hope you enjoyed this activity, and we'll have 3 more lantern activities as well.